Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Dean Esme, Operations Manager of Voice for Men, and I have a special interview I have set up to do today with Australian counselor uh, Paul Batey, Australian counselor Paul Batey. He runs supportforguys.com, also known as Sydney Counselors, which I take it, Paul, would mean that you are in the Sydney area.
I am, but I also do a lot of Skype and phone counselling for men in the US and Canada and the UK. So.
All right, but hopefully you are impressed with my psychic ability to tell that you're in the Sydney area.
Yes, I am. I am, yes, for sure.
Okay, no, I had no hint that a guy at Sydney Counselors would be in Sydney. Um, all right, so you specialize in counseling men then, eh? Well, what sort of issues do you counsel them on?
That's interesting, Dean, because I think when I started the practice, my intention was to focus on was to focus on drug and alcohol issues. Um, and I do some of that, but really the main problems that men come to me with really are self-esteem. That the number one would be self-esteem issues.
Really?
Uh, they and that's quite often as a result of without being specific about any particular client, but generally it's to do with their upbringing and toxic relationships that they've had with women, and they've come out the other side, and they want to kind of rebuild themselves.
I see. And I see you're a professional counselor. I believe you said you've got a postgraduate certificate in this sort of thing. So you're just not some guy who says, "Oh, I'm going to be a counselor."
No, that's no, no. And I did crisis and suicide counselling for a couple of years on a volunteer basis before I did my studies as well. So.
Well, today is White Ribbon Day, being celebrated in Australia and some other countries. So I'd be curious, have you ever dealt with a man who's had to deal with abuse issues himself?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes, and particularly when I was doing the suicide counselling, that was it was an eye opener. It was I always I always thought that the idea was out there that men could suffer abuse, but that really hit it home, and the damage that it caused these guys. And look, I'm not saying that women are that there isn't family violence against women, and that isn't a problem. Of course it is. But I think one of the things that White Ribbon Day is, it simplifies it down too far. It's basically saying, if you've got a penis, stop hitting people that have got vaginas, and it ignores all the other contributing factors that go towards family violence, socioeconomic addiction, whatever. It's a very, very complex problem. It's not a gender problem, not a gender specific problem.
And I'm going to go ahead and underline that for anybody who may not be paying attention, because although you know followers who've been watching me for a while already know where I'm at. I work with Erin Pitsey, who founded the Battered Women's Refuge Movement. I've been working on domestic violence issues for many years. But let's get it clear. You work with men in abusive relationships or who've dealt with abusive relationships. And by that, although I'm sure it goes the other way too, what you mean is primarily guys who are victims of it,
Oh yes, for sure.
experienced it.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, I'm sure you've had to deal with men who have violence and anger problems themselves,
Yeah,
but you see a substantial number of clients who have been abused by their mothers or abused by a wife or a girlfriend, etc., physically, emotionally, even sexually, possibly. Um,
um, yeah. I haven't had personal experience with sexual victims, but the other issues you mentioned there for sure, and and it's amazing how much sometimes guys that have that have, that have that have been on the receiving end of abuse, even in a counselling situation, uh, they minimize it. They minimize it. It's kind of it's one of those things that it's not okay for a man to admit. um, through therapy eventually, comes out. But there's all sorts of stigma associated with men being victims as well as perpetrators. Yeah.
I have seen this personally, and I've heard from more than one counselor, and I don't just mean in the United States. Obviously, everybody can hear that I'm an American, but I mean in the UK, in Canada, Australia. Guys, you will just ask them, have you ever, did she abuse you? Were you ever abused? No, 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 no. All right. Now you ask this question. Did she ever hit you? Did she ever throw anything at you? Did she ever punch you? Did she ever kick you? Did she ever spit at you? And then, well, yes. And I
Yeah.
often I find myself wondering, are men actually incapable of seeing that that is abusive behavior and not appropriate and not healthy at all? Uh,
Yeah, it's kind of oh yeah, that happened, but but I'm a guy, so I should be able to, I am the stronger gender, so that sort of stuff doesn't hurt me, and it wasn't real abuse, but they're the things that cause the issues. Anyone who's abused, male or female, they're very damaging things, and it's really sad that it's still in 2014. It, there's something about society that it's not okay for guys to say, "Look, I'm a victim of abuse," and that's shocking.
it is, because, well, I don't want to go on a too long of a rant here or take up too much of your time, but I think when we have a society, and it's not just in Australia, it's around the world, we relentlessly tell guys it's their job to protect women and it's their job to stop abuse, which is unfortunately, in my opinion, what the White Ribbon Campaign in Australia is the message that they're sending to people. And now,
Yep.
my personal opinion is, they get 1 point from me for raising awareness of the issue of family violence, and White Ribbon Australia gets like minus 1,000 points for me for making it about men's violence toward women, when that's not. There are hundreds of studies on this, and they all say the same thing. Men and women are about equally abusive. And in mutually abusive environments, correct me if I'm wrong, if you think I'm wrong, but I've seen the studies and I've talked to the professors, in mutually abusive relationships, which are common, about 70% of the time it's the woman who started hitting first. And I don't know if in your practice you see something roughly looking like that or not, but I'm astounded.
Yeah, I do, and again, it's minimized. It's well, it was just a slap, and a lot of the time it's not the physical harm that's caused. It's the mental anguish it causes when someone is dominating you through any sort of physicality. It's a horrible thing for anyone to go through.
And a lot of guys,
Uh,
they just won't hit back anyway, right? She's
no,
slapping him and she's calling him names and she's throwing things at him. May even cause bruising or bleeding, because women are perfectly capable of using a knife or whatever. And they just won't see it as abuse. They'll just see it as their fault, right?
absolutely, and you'll see the same. The cycle of abuse, from what I've seen, is not gender specific. So there'll be an episode, then there'll be the buyback, the honeymoon period, and then slowly it will escalate, and the victim will start walking on eggshells, being very careful of what they do until bang, there's another episode, and that's not gender specific. The the figures for particularly when you look at the I've recently looked at figures inspired by Paul's video yesterday, where he made a very
Paul,
a
Paul
very good
Elam.
point. Paul Elam, yes, yes, sorry.
You've never met
He made
Paul,
a
have
very
you?
sorry.
You've never met Paul, have you?
No, I haven't. No, in fact, I first heard him on the Tom Liker show. So uh,
All right, I
I
didn't.
advertise
I
on the
just
Tom
wanted to get
Liker
that out of
show.
the way. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Anyway, so you were listening to what Paul Elam was saying the other day
Yeah,
yesterday.
and this is one of the things that I find frustrating about how the men's movement is regarded, because what Paul said was very fair. He said that, look, this is violence is a very complex issue, but it quite often stems from people's experiences when they're children, childhood experiences, and at the moment, it's mainly mothers that are abusive to their children. But, and don't cut me off there, because what he went on to say was, he said, that's probably because the way things are with custody or whatever, that's because there's more single mums. So there's more single mums, that they're going to be more, there's going to be more instances of neglect or abuse from mothers. It's not gender specific. And actually, I actually looked at the Australian statistics on this. And it's very hard to get a gender breakdown, but you can see the figures for single parent families. And when you look at single parent families, and this is from the Australian Institute of Health, um, the reports of abuse or neglect from single mother families was 4,500. From single parent male families was 500. So you think, wow, that's a huge thing. But then you look at the actual proportion of single parent families that are male and female, and it's about 11-12% are male, the rest are female. And so that just happens to exactly match up with the reported incidents of violence, that men and women are no more likely to be violent towards their children than each other. It's not a gender issue. And this is the whole thing that White Ribbon just completely glosses over because it's convenient. It's a great way to raise money. You might as well have a poster of someone with a gun to a puppy's head. You see these pictures of battered women. It pulls on your heartstrings because everyone knows that it's a fucked up thing. It's not okay for anyone to be beaten up. But it's kind of, if you don't give us money, then you're a wife beater. If you don't give us money, you hate women. And that's bullshit, And like you were saying there, Dean, raising awareness of violence, that's a great thing. If there was an awareness day where it was, okay, people, let's just stop hitting each other. Men stop hitting men, men stop hitting women, women stop hitting women, women stop hitting men, everyone stop hitting children. Let's all just be cool for a day. That would be, I'd be on board with that. But when it's, you have a penis, and men are doing these things, like they're going online to the White Ribbon .org.au website, signing a petition saying, "I promise not to hit women." That's a shaming tactic. I mean, men generally know it's not okay to hit women or men or children, or you don't have to go on a website and say, "I'm not going to do it," because most people don't. People are generally good and compassionate.
They are. And you just said it well, and I'm gonna mention this too. I mean, I'm probably sure you can't speak directly to this, but I have, because I've talked to many academics and I've looked at hundreds of studies. The number one predictor for you becoming an abuser is that you were abused as a child. That is the number one predictor by a long shot. And it should not shock anybody to hear that women hit their kids. I'm not saying all women hit their kids or that all women abuse their kids, but it should not shock anybody that women do this. Some women, many women, whatever. And yes, men hit their kids too. But you just said it. With so many single mothers, it's not to shame single mothers. It is statistically a fact that most child abuse in Australia, in Canada, in the United States, in the UK, it is a fact that most child abuse is committed by women.
Yep.
Therefore, what good is your pledge going to be unless you're calling on women to take part in this pledge too? How could it not? You can't fix the problem if you aren't making women part of the solution and holding them accountable as adults just as much as men. Wouldn't that be fair? Would you
I
think?
think that's Absolutely correct there, Dean. And and it's interesting in Australia how family violence is regarded in kind of the mainstream. So I mean, at the moment, it's everywhere. It's on every TV station. It's everywhere. And if you just look at the at Twitter for hashtag White Ribbon Day, all the big TV stations, media outlets are all buying into it.
Oh, I know. We just got a tweet from a Mark Parton, who's an Australian radio announcer in Canberra, and trying to tell us that it's not appropriate today to talk about women being violent toward men or children. And I'm like, well, what day did you? I didn't say this, but I'll ask him now if he's listening to this. I will send it to him. Mr. Parton, what day is the good day to talk about child abuse and women's participation in it? What day
Yep,
is the good day to talk about women who are abusive toward their menfolk?
yep.
Is this a human issue, or are you just a chivalrous man who thinks all men should be chivalrous and it's men's job to be beaten down, and it's men, and if women hit children, which they do, they get a free pass? I mean, most women are good mothers. Most mothers are good mothers. I guess not all women are mothers, but most women make great mothers. Um, um, but there's always those, and what are the causes of their being abused? A, they were probably abused as children by one or both of their parents, not necessarily their fathers. And these women, frequently, these violent women have substance abuse problems, they have abandonment issues, they have self-esteem issues. It's a human problem, is it not?
Absolutely. And the way that I would call it white Australia deals with this issue is quite different to the way that Aboriginal Australia tries to tackle this problem. And just so that people know, yes, I am a white man, very privileged, but I'm a very strong advocate for Aboriginal people, men and women in Australia, and I donate. Unlike people that have causes, and this is another thing about White Ribbon Day. It's an easy thing to do. It's I bought a ribbon or I clicked like on a Facebook page, and I think if people really care about issues, if you're not going to spend time and money doing something about it, then don't care about it. And it's okay not to care. Have a happy life. But if you care about something, I think it's important to get involved. And so
And to
I'm
get
involved.
educated. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm involved with an Aboriginal men's group, and I sponsor them. And we had a family violence day. When was it? October. And all the issues were raised. It was not gender specific. It was not saying Aboriginal men are the problem. And look, you're talking about people from very, very difficult socio-economic backgrounds. I mean, I could go on an irrelevant topic about how badly Aboriginal people have been treated in Australia. It's horrible. But even despite all that, there isn't the victimisation within the Aboriginal community that I can see that says that this is a male problem, and they acknowledge that women are victims and perpetrators too, and that they acknowledge that the problems are more to do with socioeconomic or addiction or alcohol, those kinds of things. And I just find it interesting how a section of the community, a far too small section of the community, is open to the idea that it's not a gender problem. But white Australia is, if you're a man, you're a bastard.
That's right. And it's your fault if she hits you, and it's your fault if she hits the kids. And this makes no sense. It's not women's problem, it's not men's problem, it's everybody's problem. And I'm pleased. I mean, as an American, I'm rather ignorant of the Aboriginal white relationship there. I know a little bit about it. But I'll just say I'm pleased to hear one aspect, which it appears that the Aboriginal community is more open-minded and advanced than the white community is in Australia. And I hope that continues.
Dean, you would be astounded by talking to Aboriginal Australians. The amount, there tends to be an attitude, we've got to learn about Aboriginals, about Koori people, but really that's wrong. We should be learning from them because despite everything, they are incredibly generous of spirit. It's I get emotional talking about it. Actually, it's something that's really touched me. Just leading on from that, the perception that it's okay to demonize men has severely affected Aboriginal people. In 2007, there was a big intervention. They called it the Northern Territory intervention, where the government said there's paedophile rings. Aboriginal men are paedophiles. We've got to send the army in and sort this community out. Now, because it's okay to demonize men generally, it's an easy target. Aboriginals are seen by white Australians as being bludgers, and they get handouts and all this sort of stuff. So what easier thing could it be to say Aboriginal men are paedophiles? So they sent the army in, and studies have shown they did health checks on 11,000 children. The amount of the number of instances for evidence for sexual abuse, 0. And I would defy any suburb in Sydney to come up with a figure of 0. But that's the perception that people have. But that's to do with the whole thing about, and it's not just Aboriginal men that have got the cloud over them. You've got airlines where it's not okay for a man to sit next to an unaccompanied child. You get asked to move. I mean,
now we're going a little far afield, and I kind of want to turn this around. You're making very good points. I'm just going to mention that I hope Australians observing White Ribbon Day today look very closely at the finances of White Ribbon Australia. These folks are getting taxpayer dollars. They're getting your charitable dollars for what you think is a good cause, but they're giving you a false message. In fact, I'm going to go on record now is I'm going to predict that the majority of men taking those pledges, I will do everything I can to stop violence against women. I will bet a significant portion of them are men who've experienced they have themselves experienced abuse at the hands of a woman, and they've internalized it and blamed it on themselves and other men, would just be my guess. But in any case, I would like to see White Ribbon Australia scrutinized more by the Australian taxpayers, by Australians giving them money, and I would like to see them either change their ways, the White Ribbon Australia people, or maybe be replaced by a group that really gives a damn about all human beings equally.
There is actually an organisation or a group in Australia, 1in3.com.au, because 1 in 3.
Greg Anderson, they run 1 in 3. Their figures go on the idea that 1 in 3 of battered people are men.
Yep.
I think their numbers are actually conservative because I think they're based on police reports. And,
yes, true.
And that's the problem, is that most men won't even report it to the police or are afraid to go to the police. But even if you accept that, all right, let's say 2 out of 3 of them is women. Where's the support for the men?
Yep.
Your government gives none, the charities do none, except for 1 in 3. And I'll also mention the Lone Fathers Association, founded by Barry Williams. And I'm going to try and get a statement out of him today, too. So, all right, everybody. Well, this has been a nice chat with Paul Batey of supportforguys.com. That's supportforguys.com, where you can check out his website, and you can look to Mr. Batey for counseling issues, not just on abuse, but on depression, substance abuse issue. I'm a friend of Bill myself, by the way. And peace out, everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Batey.
Thank you very much, Dean. Great work, man.